Dear students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am VN Prabhakar, visiting faculty at the Indian Institute of Technology, Gandhinagar. In the paper Pre and Protohistoric Cultures of India, we will be learning about the module Water Management in Ancient India. Towards the end of this module, you will be able to understand the importance of water management systems in ancient India and the technology behind it. You will be also able to understand and appreciate the necessity of such systems in a more rain-fed environment in India, and to learn lessons from past examples in understanding their nature, as well as to devise similar things for storing and harnessing rainwater for betterment of the human life. If we look into one of the earliest literature regarding the importance of water, like if we look into the Chandogya Upanishad, it mentions that it is the waters which pervade everything, big or small, the earth, the atmosphere, the heaven, the mountain, gods, men, animals, birds, grass, plants, dogs, worms, insects, ants. All these are water indeed. So that is the kind of importance of water. If you look into the earliest evidences of how water was managed or how water was used by the humans, we should go to the Indus Valley civilization. That is the earliest in which we find large scale constructions, from very mundane things like well construction to large reservoirs. So we have a variety of well constructions from cities like Harappan, Mohenjo-daro, but Mohenjo-daro is one city where we find more than 800 wells, and they were constructed using a different kind of brick. It's trapezoidal in shape, it is not rectangular in shape, so that the inward collapse can be prevented. One of the cities of the Indus Valley civilization is Dholavira. Dholavira is one among the 5 largest Indus Valley civilization cities, and here we have an excellent evidence of water management system. The city itself is a well planned one, and towards the eastern side of the castle and southern side of the castle, they have a wonderful network of water reservoirs, and they could get water into this reservoir by damming one of the rivers flowing southwards of the settlement, and diverted the water flow into these reservoirs, and ultimately the excess water was released through a sluice gate outside the settlement. This is the location in which the ancient dam is seen along the river located to the south of the settlement. Here traces of large blocks have been found, and the excavator of the site, R.S. Bisht, he kind of speculates a kind of wood mixed with blocks of stone to reconstruct a dam. So this could be the kind of arrangement in which the dam could have been constructed. It is not a big dam in terms of modern examples, but a very small one using the local materials, logs of wood, and intermixing with stone blocks to block the water and divert them into channels and ultimately to the reservoirs. So this is also an artistic imagination of the city of Dholavira, how the water could have been very well managed, diverted from the 2 rivulets flowing north and south of the river, and after filling the reservoirs, they were diverted all around the settlement so that it can remain for a quite long period. These kind of stepped reservoirs were built high up in the castles. They were also fed from a very huge well constructed in the castle towards the end of the Harappan civilization at Dholavira, that is around 2000 to 1900 BCE, to get good water supply, and it can be stored in these stepped reservoirs for the important personalities living inside the castle. These kind of huge drains and stormwater channels which were constructed in the castle to divert water flow into the reservoirs, and also can be used during the lean period. The Harappan at Dholavira, they constructed large reservoirs, as I told you. This is located to the east of the castle, and it's a vast reservoir measuring 73 meter by 29 meter by 10 meters, and could have a holding capacity of nearly 20,000 cubic meter. That is the kind of vast quantity of water it could hold. And inside this eastern reservoir, towards the middle of the eastern wall, is located a small rudimentary stepped well, and this could be termed as one of the earliest step well in India, coming from the Harappan context. And during lean period, this step well was used for obtaining water, and the unique thing is that it is completely rock cut. They have scooped out the rock from the bedrock and constructed this step well. This is the reservoir located to the south of the castle. It is a series of reservoirs. At present, 5 reservoirs have been excavated. The central one is the most elaborate. It consists of 2 levels, the upper one measuring 33 meter by 9 meter and the lower one measuring 15.5 meter by 5.7 meter. So it is in 2 levels and it is partly rock cut. They have scooped out the rock entirely and they have constructed it, and wherever the rock is undulating, they have used cut stone blocks, very finely shaped and polished, and they have used for the wall portions. So this is the central attraction of the series of southern reservoirs. The first 2 reservoirs served as a desilting chamber in which the water first enters, and they are interconnected through channels. This is the kind of channel network interconnecting between 2 reservoirs in which water flows from one reservoir to another reservoir. Then it is stored in the central southern reservoir, and ultimately from there it goes into another set of 2 reservoirs, and ultimately it is diverted through a sluice channel. Interestingly, we have rudimentary water diversion networks in the uplands. Like in Balochistan, it has been observed that they have been constructing gabar bunds. It is known as gabar bunds. In the Zoroastrian language, it is meaning dam. So in Sindh, Khoistan, Khirtar and Balochistan area, some dating back to nearly 3rd millennium BCE, we find these kind of gabar bunds constructed along the sides of the river channels and the small streams, so that the river partly can be diverted and the silt can be deposited on these kind of embankments, which can be ultimately used for cultivating crops. So these are very good indigenous developments for creating small, fertile and naturally watered fields. And in the literature also, if we come to the later early historic period, because during the Harappan civilization we don't have enough literary evidences which speak about a large number of reservoirs, but if we come into the early historic period, the Arthashastra, it gives a very good account of the irrigation works existing during the early historic period. Kautilya, he mentions about divining, water lifting devices and various irrigation techniques. Divining to find out the water sources, then water lifting devices through a localized mechanism to lift the water from the river level up to the field levels. Farmers, they also had to pay for water, the lowest rate for water from their own waterworks, the highest when they set flowing in channels by a mechanism. So it's a kind of depending upon the mechanism in which the water has been distributed by the farmers. So depending upon it, they had to pay a tax. But they were also constructing tanks for the common use by pooling resources by the local inhabitants. Tax exemptions of varying durations were granted for new or renovated tanks. Fines were also prescribed for obstructing or diverting a water source. It is an offense. So failing to cooperate in the building of a irrigation tank, damaging embankments or causing a lower tank to dry up, or construction of tank at a higher level. So these are all some of the basic offenses which have been listed in Arthashastra. Some of the water structures, they are also mentioned in inscriptions. Inscriptions are very valuable records from the historical period, from which we can know about the kind of water networks. Numerous inscriptions record constructions of tanks. They are mentioned as tataka, and ponds, that is known as vapi, and also their maintenance, desilting, repair of embankments, sluices, irrigation channels. So these are all things are mentioned, and different mechanisms were evolved for the effective maintenance. Irrigation with well water was also prevalent, particularly along the river banks, along the rivers, and also along the coastal areas. Taxes paid by water diviners are acknowledged in some inscriptions. Even today, some of the water diviners, they speak about the location of certain water sources buried below the earth. One of the important evidence is from a Perur Patishwara temple, where the Kongu Chola king Vijayabahu, he issued orders regarding water management on the Noyal river. A new dam must not affect the older one, which should be allowed to fill first. The new dam was designed to store water in times of excess. So this is the kind of arrangement, this is the kind of understanding which they developed to conserve water and preserve water more in the rain-fed areas. One of the inscriptions from Andhra Pradesh, it's a 16th century inscription. It mentions that even gods, men as ancestors, celestial beings, reptiles, immovables, demons and spirits depend on the water of the reservoirs. And the water impounded in such works will quench the thirst of the animals. birds, human beings and others. As a result, those who construct these kind of reservoirs will earn the punya and equivalent to the performance of an Ashwamedha Yajna. That is the kind of importance attached to the construction of reservoirs for water. We have from the early historic context very good examples of water reservoirs, like what we have seen at Dholavira, how they have constructed a channel, diverted water into a series of reservoirs. We have a very good evidence from a North Indian city known as Sringaverapura, located on the banks of river Ganga, where a series of water chambers and reservoirs have been built to divert water from the nearby Ganga to a channel, and then desilting chambers, and ultimately to a huge reservoir. This was excavated and constructed during the 1st century CE, and it was excavated by Bibilal. These kind of mechanisms very well reflect the kind of advanced technology of water management. So in the South Indian context, we have a very good example coming from construction of a dam locally known as Kallanai. Kal means stone, Anai means dam, built by Karikala Chola, one of the early Chola kings. Now it is known as Grand Anicut. This picture shows a modified version of the one. This is not the exact dam which was built by Karikala Chola. It is a modern one, but it is said to be on the location of the ancient dam. So why it was constructed? Kallanai, it was constructed because nearly 1800 years ago it was constructed to divert or keep the waters of the Kaveri from flowing into the faster and steeper Kolidam river. So this was the main objective. So to have a continuous water flow in the Kaveri river and not into the Kolidam river, so this dam was constructed. So this is one of the earliest instances of a dam in South India. From a sketch based on a 1777 report on the Grand Anicut, we can understand what kind of mechanism was involved, how they have blocked the flow of the river into the Kolidam river by constructing a tow wall connecting two banks and thereby diverting the water into the main Kaveri river bed. Water management is effectively understood in the more drought prone areas and drier areas, like one of the best examples is Burhanpur. Another example is from Aurangabad city in Maharashtra, where they have devised indigenous mechanisms in which water flowing into the valleys can be diverted into underground channels by building a series of mechanisms and purely diverting them under the force of gravity. So they were constructing channels in such a manner that only through the force of gravity they could divert the water and ultimately reaching to the population. One such example is at Burhanpur, where the groundwater from the Satpura hills and the nearby hills is captured through a network of collection chambers that is known as Jali Karanj and channeled to the town. The air shafts in between, they also served as for escape of the air and also serve as the purpose of wells from which the water can be extracted by the local population. So this is the kind of arrangement, this is the kind of underground water channels which they built. Some places it is as high as the human, around 1.5 meters to 1.6 meters in height. Some places it is narrow, depending upon the flow of water, depending upon the terrain in which these channels are constructed. This is the view of the sumps or the manholes through which one can enter into this underground channel and also clean the channels so that the continuous water flow can be maintained. Similar sort of channel network existed in various parts of India. I told you one example is from Aurangabad, where it has been estimated that 14 such different channels existed all around the city from the nearby hills and diverting them to the populated areas. One such canal or channel is still existing today, which supplies water during the rainy season, that is known as the Tathe Nahar in Aurangabad. And we have several other examples, like in Kerala also there is one example there known as Surangam. Surangam means an underground channel. Okay, and it may extend even up to 300 meters into the hillside. That is the kind of arrangement. They could trap the water even up to such great distances below the hills, and the water that's collected is usually collected in a tank. The tunnels were dug over a generation of 2 generations so that it was kept continuously under construction, so that ultimately the water can be trapped and diverted into a nearby reservoir. In Rajasthan also we have a system of above ground trapping of water. It is known as Kadin system of 15th century, where water from the catchment area, they are diverted and stored in low lying areas by building embankments wherever necessary, and the water level can be stored here, and the excess water, it can be diverted into another storage tank at the lower level, and nearby these storage areas are constructed wells which can be used for getting the water from these nearby areas. The medieval period water management was also very effective in a manner such that the construction of forts, important forts either in Rajasthan or Madhya Pradesh or Maharashtra, they were built in such a fashion that they were understanding the contours of the top of the hills. They could harness and collect the rainwater to the low-lying areas, and they could store them in deep reservoirs. They were desilting it at continuous intervals, and they were efficiently water harvesting whatever available during the rainy season. It was stored. So such example one can see at Chittor. This is the Chittorgarh fort in Rajasthan. It is a 150-meter high hillock in which several water reservoirs were created depending upon the contour and water source. Another example is coming from Jodhpur, where the surface runoff water is captured from the plateau as well as the seepage water through wells and step wells. This can be created, the surface runoff can be trapped and diverted to all these kind of reservoirs and wells, and that can be used during the lean period. So this is the kind of understanding of local terrain and local seasons and diverting the water to usable water reservoirs. Jodhpur is also an excellent example of how the water supply scheme was developed. It was a trapping of water, and then the supply of water was made. It was effectively made under Jaswant Singh II of the 19th century by building a series of lakes, burns and canals so that water can be effectively managed in a very big area. Coming to the eastern part of India, how they were managing the water. Here what they have done is during the flood seasons, they were creating a canal on the embankment so that the excess water can be diverted into the nearby areas, and it can be useful in specifically in the shallow rivers, and which help in deposition of silt also, because the shallow rivers, when it is overflowing with water because of the rains and other agencies, so they also transport a very rich and fertile silt into the nearby fields that can be later used for irrigation. Traveling towards the west, Gujarat, it provides a very good example of a water management system in the form of long channels and tanks and reservoirs near the river Sarasvati in Patan. In Patan there is a river Sarasvati where the water was diverted into a series of reservoirs and also temples constructed on important junctions, and water was conserved here in a huge reservoir. Various kind of deities were also depicted on the channels like Ganga, Yamuna, Sarasvati. They are normally depicted wherever a temple or there or a water source is there, symbolically representing that here, look, the Ganga, Yamuna and Saraswati is flowing here. You worship the deities here and you attain the punya. So this kind of attachment, this kind of importance was attached to the water flowing reservoirs, and how people they were really appreciating the importance of water. At Patan also we have a beautifully decorated step well. It is one of the elaborately carved step wells. It is in 7 stories level. Recently it was inscribed in the World Heritage list. So it contains a very good mechanism of storing water, conserving water, and it can be used during the lean period. This has an elaborate sculptural art also. I mean, it has various examples of sculptures representing deities, apsaras and gods and goddesses. You can see the various avatars of Vishnu. Here the Varaha avatar is depicted, and adjoining there are 2 panels of apsaras. So it contains an elaborate depiction of various gods and goddesses and apsaras also. This is another tank in front of a sun temple Modhera. It is also an elaborately decorated tank. These kind of steps with side steps resembling a star-like pattern is one of the most famous concepts all over India. I mean, if you go to Vijayanagara, there also you will find a similar tank. It is known as the lotus tank. There are many places where they have tried to kind of duplicate this kind of construction. It gives much more importance. You can perform rituals on these platforms and worship the god also. So this is the kind of attachment they were giving to the water resources. So these are all examples of the similar star-like pattern of the steps. One is from Chand Baudi from Rajasthan, built in the 9th century. It has 3,500 narrow steps. So this kind of elaborate arrangement, ultimately reaching up to the lowest level, because the tanks, they have been dug so deep so that the water can be reached even during the lean period. If there are shallow reservoirs, it will store only a less quantity of water, but if they are really deep, it can store a large quantity of water. Several temple tanks, if we look into the tanks constructed adjacent to the temples in South India, whether it be Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala or Tamil Nadu, we will find these kind of huge reservoirs adjacent to the temples, and also keeping in account of the terrain, the flow of water, so that the water can be collected effectively. This one particular example is from Shravana Belagula. It has a dual role of a temple tank as well as to the local population. Dams were also constructed. We have seen the example of Dholavira Dam nearly 4,500 years ago, but during the historical period also we have seen evidence of dams constructed by Karikala Chola in South India. But here, even in northern India, we have an excellent example of a dam coming from Anandpur in Haryana, very close to Delhi, south of Delhi. This dam is located, and it was built during the period of Anangpal in the 8th century. It intercepts a small stream flowing from the Aravalli hills, and it can store rainwater during the monsoon season, and it was built of the locally available quartzite stone. Whatever stone was available locally, it was pooled in, it was built in, so that the flow of water can be blocked and it can be used during the lean period. Another important concept is the construction of tanks. If we look at the various villages and towns of South India, whether it be Andhra Pradesh or Tamil Nadu, we see a series of water tanks constructed in each and every village. Each and every village will have a tank. So they are constructed in such a manner that the contour is taken into account. From the catchment area, it flows into the slopy area, and the water can be trapped by building some embankment, and the excess water is diverted into channels, and ultimately it reaches to the river. So one such example we see in the Pala river basin of Tamil Nadu, where the relative sizes of tanks, you can see the smaller and bigger tanks, how they are interconnected. They are all interconnected. They are used for trapping water at every level, every contour level, and the excess water will be flown into the next tank and ultimately drains into the bigger tank and reaches the river. So this is the kind of water management or water storage capacity which the people developed during the ancient period. So a statistic shows that more than 1,500 tanks were built in this basin of this river. So the connectivity is very complex and the variation in size is considerable. The 11 large tanks can hold 60% of the total water storage, while the remaining 187 tanks can hold only 40%. The smaller tanks are so numerous, probably for the better, more decentralized distribution. Another example is from the northeastern Karnataka, where water management system collapsed with the coming of the Bahmani kingdom in the 14th century. So a traditional knowledge which is developed during a particular period may not be appreciated by a subsequent period. This is the best example from northeastern Karnataka, where a traditional which was helpful in storing water in a particular period was disconnected and abandoned by the later rulers. If we travel upwards, like we have seen evidence from the plains, if we travel upwards in the hilly regions, wherever the flow of water is, because there one cannot construct huge reservoirs or tanks because of their terrain. So wherever the water was flowing, they were diverted into small channels, even with the aid of a small bamboo sticks. With the holes, they were diverting it, and they were getting water to channelized into them, either to the agricultural fields or to the nearby houses. So this kind of channelization is possible. Here the example is shown from the northeastern region of India, which is very cheap and very effective also. So these kind of water management in the local water management, it is done by the communities, by specific communities But later, what happened during the colonial rule, the administration took over their management, often entrusting it to the public works department. Neither there's a case of misunderstanding of the functioning, or even the less importance attached to this kind of water structures could have effectively led to its collapse, or the entire system could have collapsed due to the less understanding of the system. If we appreciate well about the systems, we can maintain it in a better manner. So what is the lesson we learned from the past? Large irrigation projects can easily fail. I mean, because we are constructing very huge dams, it can lead into silting, evaporation, loss in transport. But the smaller decentralized water management has a better chance to succeed, because we have seen in southern part of India how the tanks built during the Pallava and Chola dynasties have survived even up to the modern period, and which provide water to the local population, and also the locals participate in a better manner for their effective management. So one of the aspects of finding water is the water divining. Like, what is that? It's a very old ancient tradition, like we have seen in Arthashastra, how one of the water divining example is depicted. Even in Varaha Mihira Brihat Samhita, we also have one such example. Here what happens is the water is indicated by the proximity of certain trees. By looking into the location of certain kind of species of trees, one can determine the properties of the soil and identify what kind of trees can grow under what kind of water sources and at what level. So this can be used to identify the water. Even the properties of the soils, earth smelling like iron at a depth of 5 cubits, or pale white clay, ant hills, a frog, a tortoise. So all these things can be taken as an evidence to locate certain water bodies. Astrological considerations could have also played a part. These are all put together could have helped in identifying certain water sources, but there is no scientific evaluation for this kind of traditional knowledge system. This can be effective at certain occasions, it may not be effective on certain occasions. It can be also as a supplementary tool to find a water source. So we are concluding this module with the representation of Ganga and Yamuna. Ganga and Yamuna they are two rivers which are attached to very high values. Wherever you go, you will find the images of Ganga and Yamuna on the door entrance. On both sides of the door entrance, you will find the sculpture of Ganga and Yamuna. Before entering into the temple, as though you are purified by the waters of Ganga and Yamuna. That is the philosophy, that is the concept, because everybody cannot travel to the regions of Ganga and Yamuna. So while entering the temple, we are purified by the Ganga and Yamuna, and that's why we attach so much importance to the water. We have seen a very long tradition starting from the Indus civilization or from the 3rd millennium BCE of construction of water reservoirs to manage waters, to store them during the monsoon season. That is the important season for the Indian subcontinent. The people understood that water stored during the rainy season can be effectively used during the dry season. And we can also learn lessons how the traditional water systems, they were surviving for over 2000 years and supplying water to the local population, and the loss of this traditional knowledge will cause more harm. So we have to appreciate our traditional water management systems and can also use them effectively for the future. For more information, you can refer to other modules by logging on into the EPG Pathshala website, and also can link into other courses to find out more information.